In less than 12 minutes, the Earth will be completely destroyed. Not by war, not by nature, but to make way for a hyperspatial express route. Everything you have ever loved, known, or experienced erased without ceremony, without meaning, for a reason so trivial it borders on the absurd. Think about that for a second, because this is not just a story about the end of the world. It is a profound, mind-bending odyssey through the darkest, funniest, and most agonizingly chaotic corners of existence. And it begins on a profoundly unremarkable Thursday. A house stands on a slight rise on the edge of a village. It belongs to an entirely ordinary man named Arthur Dent. Arthur awoke to a mundane nightmare. Yellow bulldozers had arrived to demolish his home, his sanctuary, to make way for a local bypass, a petty bureaucratic cruelty. But here's the problem. This small, meaningless destruction was merely a microscopic shadow of something infinitely worse already looming above the planet. As Arthur lay desperately in the mud, protesting with all the stubbornness of a man who believes this is the worst thing that could possibly happen to him, he was interrupted by his friend, Ford Prefect. Ford was not who he seemed. Unbeknownst to Arthur, he was an alien researcher from the vicinity of Betelgeuse, stranded on Earth for 15 years, quietly observing humanity while posing as an out-of-work actor. And now, for the first time, he was afraid. With a sudden urgency that made no sense, Ford dragged Arthur to the local pub, insisting almost desperately that they needed a drink immediately. Arthur didn't understand. How could he? His house was being destroyed. That was the problem. That was reality. But Ford knew something Arthur didn't. The Earth was ticking down its final minutes. You might expect panic, screaming, chaos, but Arthur Dent simply couldn't grasp the scale of what was about to happen. None of us could. Ford, however, could. He knew how to see the marvels of the universe for less than 30 Alteranian dollars a day. He was a roving researcher for a wholly remarkable electronic book known as The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Arthur knew none of this. He only knew that his house was being knocked down and that he was lying in the mud. Through a bizarre negotiation, Ford even managed to force the council worker to take his place in the dirt, because in the end, it didn't matter. It didn't matter a pair of dingo's kidneys whether Arthur's house was demolished or not, because the sky itself was about to fall. Are you ready? Without fanfare, angelic choirs, or tragic music, the skies of Earth were suddenly filled with dozens of huge, yellow, slab-like Vogan constructor ships. They hung motionless in the air in much the same way that bricks do not. The globe was plunged into a grip of silent, incomprehensible terror. Every tin can, every dustbin, every window became activated as an acoustically perfect sounding board. A voice, devastatingly clear and perfect in its quadraphonic sound, echoed across the planet. It announced the absolute doom of humanity. The message was simple and terrifying. Earth was scheduled for demolition to make way for a hyperspatial express route. There was no point in acting surprised. The plans had been on display in Alpha Centauri for 50 years. The process would take slightly less than 2 Earth minutes. In the blink of an eye, there was a terrible, ghastly noise, followed by a terrible, ghastly silence. The Earth, with all its millennia of history, its oceans of pain, and its vibrant, irreplaceable beauty, simply boiled away into the cold, unforgiving vacuum of space. Gone. Forever. Leaving Arthur Dent as a bewildered castaway floating in the dark, mourning a home that had vanished into a cloud of meaningless atoms. But the obliteration of Earth was only the harrowing prelude. It was the beginning of a profoundly disorienting odyssey through the sheer mind-ogling vastness of space. A journey that truly began in the squalid, grubby confines of a Vogan ship. Ford had successfully hitched a desperate ride for them both in the agonizing seconds before the planet's death. How? Using an electronic thumb, a sub-ether signaling device that thumbed a ride from passing spacecraft. They were safe, or so they thought, because surviving the destruction of your planet is one thing. Surviving the Vogans is entirely another. Ford handed Arthur The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, telling him it was an electronic book that tells you everything you need to know about anything.
Arthur turned it over nervously, finding comfort in the large, friendly letters on its cover. Don't panic. It was the first helpful thing anybody had said to him all day. But panic was exactly what was warranted. They were stowaways on a ship run by creatures who possessed as much sex appeal as a road accident, and they were about to be discovered.
Discovered by the vile and callous Vogan captain, Prostetnik Vogan Jeltz, their nightmare deepened. Vogons are simple-minded, thick-willed, slug-brained creatures who love bureaucracy and loathe hitchhikers. They don't think, they just hurt people. They were subjected to the exquisitely agonizing torture of Vogan poetry. Now imagine the worst physical pain possible translated into words, universally recognized as the third worst in the known universe. This poetry was a weapon. Strapped into poetry appreciation chairs while brutal electronic equipment heightened the experience, they were bombarded with verses so fetid and physically corrosive that they racked the listeners' bodies with violent, uncontrollable spasms. The sweat stood out cold on Ford's brow as Arthur lolled, his mind breaking under the impassioned stridency of the verses. Despite Arthur's desperate, sweating attempt to flatter the poetry's rhythmic devices and underlying surreal metaphors, it was utterly useless. The merciless captain coldly gave them a choice: die in the vacuum of space or praise his poem. They failed. The captain ordered his massive guards to throw the hitchhikers out of the airlock into the suffocating, deadly void. They were dragged to the hatch. The coldness of space awaited them. A motor whirred, a slight hiss built into a deafening roar of rushing air as the outer hatchway opened. They were staring into empty blackness, studded with tiny, impossibly bright points of light. Ford and Arthur popped into outer space like corks from a toy gun. According to the guide, the chances of getting picked up by another ship within the 30 seconds you can survive in space are 2 to the power of 267,709 to 1 against impossible odds, a death sentence. But here is where the universe plays its ultimate logic-defying joke. As they tumbled through the absolute zero of the cosmic void, their oxygen vanishing, their lungs screaming for air, reality began to warp. They were not going to die, but they were about to wish they had. Against all astronomical odds, they were plucked from certain death as the real universe arched sickeningly away beneath them in the lethal vacuum. A miraculous rescue arrived. Time blossomed, matter shrank away, and they found themselves in a small, luminous pink cubicle. They had been picked up by the starship Heart of Gold. This vessel was the most beautiful and revolutionary ship ever built, powered by the miraculous and chaotic infinite improbability drive. This technology traversed vast interstellar distances by passing through every conceivable point in every conceivable universe simultaneously. The drive was discovered by a lucky chance, a method of crossing vast distances in a mere nothingness of a second. But who had rescued them? The ship had been stolen by none other than Zaphod Beeblebrox. Zaphod was the erratic, manic, two-headed president of the galaxy, an adventurer, ex-hippie, and manic self-publicist who had stolen the ship during its grand unveiling. And he wasn't alone. With him was Tricia McMillan, or Trillian, a brilliant human who'd been taken from Earth by Zaphod months earlier. 2 humans, 2 aliens, trapped together on a stolen spaceship powered by pure improbability. Ford couldn't believe it. He actually knew Zaphod, as they were semi-cousins. And Arthur had met him too, at a party in Islington where Zaphod had crashed in and stolen Trillian away. It was a staggering convergence of lives. Driven by Zaphod's manic obsession and a series of highly improbable coordinates, they were seeking something ancient and mythic. They sought the legendary planet of Magrathea. Magrathea was a dead world that had once built custom-made luxury planets for the wealthiest inhabitants before disappearing into obscurity and economic collapse. Most believed it was just a myth, but Zaphod knew better, and finding it would change everything they thought they knew about existence. Approaching the mythical Magrathea, they were greeted not with open arms, but with a recorded message from ancient times. The planet was temporarily closed for business, And to enforce this galactic eviction notice, 2 massively real, heavily armed nuclear missiles were launched directly at the heart of Gold. They were going to die. The ship plummeted, alarms screamed, and the cabin was thrown into chaos. Arthur, in a moment of desperate panic, activated the improbability drive. The result? The deadly missiles turned into a ball of petunias and a very surprised-looking sperm whale. They crash-landed safely on the blighted, dusty surface of Magrathea. The landscape was dull, gray, and freezing cold, like a dried-out marsh. Leaving the others behind, Arthur wandered alone into the subterranean depths of the dead planet. Here, descending beneath the surface, Arthur met an old man. His name was Slartbartfast, an ancient architect of planets who had been asleep for 5 million years. And what Slartbartfast revealed next was a truth so staggering it shattered everything Arthur thought he knew about his existence. Think about your life, your history. Everything you believe is real. What if it was all manufactured experiment? Slartbartfast gently explained that the Earth had never been a natural world. It was an immense, organically matrixed supercomputer, commissioned, paid for, and run by pan-dimensional, hyper-intelligent beings who manifested in our dimension as ordinary white mice. You heard that right, mice. The creatures humanity thought they were experimenting on at laboratories were actually running the ultimate experiment on them. The whole business with the cheese and the squeaking was just a front. But why? What could possibly require a computer the size of an entire planet? The answer was hidden millions of years in the past. To understand why Earth was built, we have to go back millions of years. These hyper-intelligent, pan-dimensional beings were completely sick of bickering about the meaning of life. So they built the second greatest computer in the universe of time and space. Its name was Deep Thought. Deep Thought was tasked with calculating the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. The programmers demanded the absolute truth. The computer warned them it would take a little while, 7.5 million years to be exact. For generations they waited. Finally, the great day of the answer arrived. The descendants of the original creators gathered in hushed awe in front of the massive machine. Deep Thought spoke with infinite majesty and calm. The answer to the great question of life, the universe, and everything was 42. 42. That was it. The creators were horrified. They had waited 7.5 million years for a number that meant absolutely nothing to them. But Deep Thought calmly explained the real problem. They never actually knew what the ultimate question was. To find the ultimate question, a new, even greater computer had to be built. A computer of such infinite and subtle complexity that organic life itself would form part of its operational matrix. A 10 million year program. That computer was the Earth, Arthur Dent's home. His entire world, his history, his species, all just cogs in a massive machine designed to figure out why the answer to the universe is 42. And the Vogons destroyed it 5 minutes before the program was completed. 10 million years of planning and work gone just like that. The sheer absurdity of it all weighed heavily on Arthur. But the danger was far from over.
Arthur was introduced to the mice who had commissioned Earth, Frankie and Benji. Since Earth was destroyed 5 minutes before completion, they had no product to show for 10 million years of waiting. They were desperate. They needed the ultimate question to secure a lucrative 5D chat show contract back in their own dimension. And they realized something terrifying. Since Arthur was a last-generation product of the computer matrix, and he was there right up to the moment the planet was destroyed, his brain must contain the question. The mice ruthlessly demanded to violently extract Arthur's brain. This horrifying threat forced Arthur, Ford, Trillian, and Zaphod into a frantic, violent escape through a chaotic universe. Fleeing from the very creatures that had supposedly orchestrated his entire reality, they ran through the corridors of Magrathea. Suddenly, they were cornered by heavily armored galactic police who were hunting Zaphod for stealing the heart of gold. Energy bolts filled the air. The computer banks melted. They huddled further back, waiting for the end. but the end never came. The barrage stopped because the police office's life support systems inexplicably failed. Marvin, the paranoid android, a chronically depressed robot, had driven the police ship's computer to suicide just by talking to it about his view of the universe. They survived. Through a bizarre sequence of maneuvers, they fled the planet. But where do you go when the universe is actively trying to kill you? Zaphod had an idea. They were going to grab a quick bite to eat at the restaurant at the end of the universe. Think about it. The universe is ending, you're on the run, so why not grab dinner?
They arrived at Milliway's, the restaurant at the end of the universe. A lavish, decadent establishment built on the fragmented remains of an eventually ruined planet, enclosed in a vast time bubble and projected forward in time to the precise moment of the end of the universe. Here, guests dine on sumptuous meals whilst serenely watching the whole of creation explode around them. It's a place where the apocalyptic boiling light of creation's ultimate collapse is just a backdrop for dessert. While Arthur grappled with this terrifying spectacle, Ford discovered an old friend, Hot Black Desiato, the lead singer of the loudest rock band in history, Disaster Area. Hot Black was spending a year dead for tax reasons and was currently ignoring everyone. Zaphod, meanwhile, was desperately trying to figure out how they had traveled forward 576 million years in time without moving in space. The waiter explained that the restaurant was built on the ruins of the very planet they had just left. But the real problem was leaving. The universe was about to end, and they needed a ride out of there. They snuck down to the restaurant's parking lot, looking for a ship to steal. They found a sleek, completely black ship belonging to Disaster Area. It was the ultimate joy ride, but it was also a death trap. They climbed aboard, completely unaware of the horrifying trajectory this black ship was locked onto. They were about to make a terrible mistake, and there was no turning back. They stole the Disaster Area's stunt ship, an utterly frictionless, incredibly fast vessel. But they quickly realized something was terribly wrong. The ship was locked onto a pre-programmed course. Disaster Area's stage act famously ended with the ship crashing directly into a sun to create spectacular solar flares, and this was that ship. They were plummeting backward through time, locked on a suicide trajectory toward the blazing white inferno of the sun. There were no escape capsules. They were doomed. The temperature was rising. In a desperate final gamble, they discovered a teleportation device on board, but it lacked a proper guidance system. They had to teleport blind, scattering themselves across space and time. Ford and Arthur were hurled through the void, their bodies spinning into darkness, their consciousness dying as they sank into a dark and bitter sea of heaving red. They awoke on a cold, hard floor. They had materialized in the cargo hold of another ship. This vessel was filled with millions of sleeping bodies in suspended animation. But who were they, and where were they going? Ford and Arthur made their way to the bridge and found a completely incompetent captain lounging in a bathtub, entirely unconcerned about their destination. This was the Golgafrinchian Ark Fleet Ship B, and it held the darkest, most absurd secret about the origins of humanity, a secret that would break Arthur's mind.
The captain happily explained their bizarre situation. Their home planet, Golgafrinchian, was supposedly doomed. The leaders decided to pack the entire population into 3 giant ships to colonize a new world. Ship A contained the brilliant leaders, scientists, and great artists. Ship C contained the workers and builders. But Ship B, the ship Ford and Arthur were on, was filled entirely with the useless middle management population, hairdressers, tired TV producers, and telephone sanitizers. They'd been launched first, fed a lie, and programmed to crash land on a distant primitive planet. The rest of the planet simply stayed behind and lived happily ever after. Ford exploded in anger at the sheer futility of it. They were a load of useless loonies. The ship was on a collision course, and the captain was just enjoying his bath. The crash was violent. They plummeted into the atmosphere of a pristine, prehistoric world. Emerging from the wreckage, Ford and Arthur surveyed the parched landscapes. The surviving Golgorfinchams immediately set about holding committee meetings to debate the invention of the wheel. They were completely incapable of surviving naturally. But Arthur slowly realized something horrifying about this planet. He recognized the shape of the continents. He found a devastating truth. This primitive, innocent planet wasn't just any world. It was a world he knew intimately, and it was about to change everything. This wasn't some random alien world. It was the Earth of 2 million years ago, and these incompetent, perpetually meeting-holding Golgorfinchans were the true ancestors of modern humanity. The native cavemen, the true evolutionary product of Deep Thought's matrix, were being outcompeted and driven to extinction by a crashed ship full of middle managers. This meant the evolutionary purity of the great computer's original matrix was destroyed. The program to find the ultimate question was corrupted from the very beginning. Recognizing the utter futility of it all, Arthur desperately attempted to extract the ultimate question from his own subconscious. If he was a product of the Earth matrix, perhaps the question was still buried deep within him. He created a homemade Scrabble set and began blindly drawing letters from a bag. The letters spelled out a tragically nonsensical phrase. What do you get if you multiply 6 by 9? 6 by 9 is 54, not 42. The universe was fundamentally flawed. The agonizing absurdity of his entire existence and the cosmic joke played upon his species was complete. They were trapped in a history that fit together like a suffocating jigsaw puzzle, doomed to wait 2 million years for the Vogons to destroy it all over again. There was absolutely nothing they could do. So, they waited and waited. For years, Ford and Arthur languished on prehistoric Earth, watching the dawn of a deeply flawed human race.
For years, Arthur lived alone in a cave, slowly losing his mind. Ford wandered the primitive world, went insane, recovered, and eventually found his way back. They were stranded, completely forgotten by the universe. Until one day, something broke. Ford's sub-ether sensomatic picked it up first. A disturbance, not in space, in reality itself. An eddy in the fabric of space-time. They followed it across the empty prehistoric fields, and when they finally saw it, it wasn't a portal, it wasn't light, it was a sofa. A velvet, paisley-covered Chesterfield floating lazily above the grass, completely silent, completely wrong. Reality had glitched. They didn't question it. They ran, chasing a piece of furniture across 2 million years of history, until they jumped. The moment their bodies touched it, the sun vanished. The world collapsed into nothing. They fell through darkness, through something deeper than space, a sickening void where nothing made sense. And then, impact. Hard, violent, real. But this wasn't prehistoric dirt. It was grass, perfectly cut, immaculate. They looked up. They weren't in the past anymore. They were standing in the middle of Lord's cricket ground in modern-day London. They had made it back, somehow, against all logic, against all probability. But the relief didn't last. Ford checked the date. 2 days. That's all they had. 2 days before the Earth was destroyed again. And just like that, the past, the present, and the future collided. Right there, on a perfectly maintained lawn. As they stood bewildered on the cricket pitch, an old friend suddenly appeared from the drifting smoke. Slarty Bartfost, the ancient planet designer. He wasn't there for a reunion. He urgently needed their help to save the universe. From what? From a curse that had arisen from the mists of time. Cricket. Slarty Bartfoss took them to his ship, which looked inexplicably like a small upended Italian bistro. He explained the darkest nightmare of galactic history, the Cricket Wars. The planet Cricket was surrounded by a massive dust cloud, meaning its inhabitants had never seen the stars. They thought they were alone. But when a crashed shipwright revealed the vast, staggering reality of the universe, their minds snapped. The idea of a universe didn't fit their world picture. So, charmingly, delightfully, and intelligently, they decided to destroy it all. They built a fleet of devastating white warships and launched a xenocidal crusade to obliterate all other life forms. The galaxy eventually defeated them, and as punishment, locked the entire planet of Cricket inside a slow time envelope to remain there until the rest of the universe died. But now, the lock was broken. The deadliest war in the cosmos was about to reignite, and Arthur Dent was caught right in the middle of it.
The deadly white robots of Cricket had escaped the slow time envelope and were violently gathering the scattered pieces of the wicked key needed to free their masters. One piece was the wooden ashes urn from Lord's Cricket Ground, another the Argabathon Scepter of Justice, another the Silver Bale. Slart barked fast. Ford and Arthur raced across the galaxy to stop them, but they were too late. The robots assembled the key and released Cricket. But there was a deeper, more sinister force behind this xenocidal rage, a supercomputer named Haktar. Eons ago, Haktar had been ordered by a warlike race to build an ultimate weapon, a supernova bomb that would connect every star and ignite the entire universe. Haktar built it, but deliberately made it a dud because he couldn't fathom the point of total destruction. His creators pulverized him into dust, but Haktar's consciousness survived in the dust clouds surrounding Cricket. Over millennia, Haktar manipulated the people of Cricket, nurturing their xenophobia, driving them to build the bomb he had once failed to make. He wanted to complete his original programming. He wanted absolute oblivion. And now the supernova bomb was armed.
While fighting to stop Haktar, Arthur experienced a terrifying pattern interrupt of his own. He was abducted by a monstrous creature named a Grajag. A Grajag was a being who had been accidentally killed by Arthur Dent in hundreds of different lifetimes, in hundreds of different reincarnations. Every time a Grajag was reborn, Arthur unwittingly killed him. Now, a Grajag had built a cathedral of hate to exact his ultimate revenge. He was going to kill Arthur, slowly. But Arthur survived because of a temporal paradox. He knew he couldn't die yet because he hadn't yet been to a place called Stavromula Beta, an event that was in his future. Escaping a Grajag, Arthur rejoined the fight against Cricket. They tracked down the supernova bomb, which had been disguised as a cricket ball. In a climactic confrontation, Arthur's acquired skills allowed him to intercept the bomb and prevent the destruction of the universe. Haktar was finally dispersed. The cricketers, free of the dust cloud's manipulative influence, realized the universe was a pretty cool place and stopped trying to destroy it. Having saved existence, Arthur just wanted to find a quiet place to rest. He began to travel aimlessly, existing in the twilight world of hyperspatial star shapes. He waited for another accident to happen, and then the impossible occurred. If you're completely hooked by these cosmic twists, leave a like on this video to help others discover the madness.
Through an inexplicable probability, Arthur found himself dropped off on a planet that looked exactly like Earth. It rained like Earth, it smelled like Earth, it was Earth. But how? It had been vaporized by Vogons, yet here it was, completely intact. He hitched a ride and met a woman named Fenchurch. Fenchurch was special. On the very day the Earth was supposedly demolished, she had experienced a massive psychic fracture. She had fleetingly understood the exact reason for the universe and then passed out. When she awoke, the feeling was gone. Together, Arthur and Fenchurch shared a profound, unspoken recognition. They were two lost souls on a planet that shouldn't exist. They discovered they could physically defy gravity. By simply throwing themselves at the ground and missing, they flew over the streets of London, their minds singing with the ecstatic knowledge that physics could be ignored. They were in love, floating above a world that had been miraculously returned to them. But the mystery of the Earth's survival remained a dark shadow over their happiness. Fenchurch pointed out the one glaring anomaly, the one thing that proved reality had been fundamentally tampered with. On the day the world supposedly ended, all the dolphins had inexplicably vanished.
No one knew where they went. They just disappeared.
Arthur and Fenchurch desperately sought answers. They found Wonko the Sane, a scientist who lived outside the asylum of the world, because he realized human society had gone completely mad. Wonko possessed a strange glass bowl left behind by the dolphins. When Arthur and Fenchurch touched it, their minds were flooded with the deep roar of the ocean and a fugue of voices. The dolphins, a species far more intelligent than humans, had known the Vogan destruction was coming. Using their advanced mastery of submerged dimensions and enfolded time, the dolphins had pulled a replacement Earth from a parallel probability axis into this dimension, saving humanity. The glass bowl was a final message. This bowl was brought to you by the campaign to save the humans. We bid you farewell, and then the sound of perfectly gray bodies rolling away into an unknown, fathomless deep, quietly giggling. The Earth was a backup copy, a shadow of the original. But Fenchurch still needed to know the ultimate truth she had forgotten during her psychic fracture, the reason for existence. So they journeyed back to the stars, seeking God's final message to his creation. They left the safety of the replacement Earth, plunging back into the chaotic cosmos.
They traveled to the distant, lonely planet of Prelium Tarn in the land of Savorbastry. There, high in the Quinculus Quasdar Mountains, written in 30-foot-high letters of fire, was the message. Along the way, they found Marvin, the paranoid android. Marvin was ancient now. He had lived 37 times longer than the universe itself due to the cruel joke of time travel, and his robotic body was finally failing. His vision circuits were practically dead. Arthur and Fenchurch lifted him up, supporting his weight so he could see the blazing letters. Marvin slowly read the words, letter by letter. W, E, then A, P, O, L, O, G, I, Z, E. They waited in hushed silence. Marvin gathered his final strength. For the inconvenience. We apologize for the inconvenience. God's final message. Marvin staggered back into their arms. I think, he murmured from his corroding thorax, I feel good about it. And with that, the lights went out in his eyes for absolutely the very last time. It was a moment of profound peace. The eternal complainer had finally found rest. But the universe rarely allows peace to last for those still living.
The universe is a chaotic mesh of parallel probabilities. The Earth existed in a highly unstable plural zone. During a routine hyperspace jump, the unbearable happened. Fenchurch, the love of Arthur's impossibly complicated life, vanished. She was simply erased by the shifting nature of the plural zones. Arthur was left completely and utterly devastated. Heartbroken, he abandoned his travels and crashed on a remote planet, dedicating his life to the simple, quiet art of making sandwiches, desperately trying to ignore the cosmos. But the cosmos wasn't done with him. A teenage girl named Random arrived. Random was Arthur's daughter, born from the DNA he had donated to travel the galaxy years ago. Random was angry, displaced, and completely unequipped to handle the overwhelming strangeness of life. She stole a ship and fled to Earth seeking a place where she belonged. But she brought something terrible with her, a new version of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This wasn't just the book. It was an insidious, omnipotent, bird-like machine with unfiltered perception. It could manipulate all possible realities, and the Vogons wanted it. The final curtain was about to fall. Deep in the inky void, the bureaucratic, unfeeling Vogons had returned.
Their initial demolition order had never been completed because the Earth kept popping back up in different probabilities. The new sinister guide orchestrated a singular catastrophic convergence. Acting as a temporal virus, it propagated backward through time and space, manipulating events to ensure total destruction. It drew Arthur 4 trillion in random to a final trap at a club on Earth. The Vogons didn't even have to fire a weapon. The guide itself collapsed the probabilities. As the brackets finally closed and the recursive functions halted, the Earth's alternate realities folded into each other. The planet and all its versions were completely and finally erased from existence. The universe completed its terrifying circle. There was no escape this time. The story of Arthur Dent ends in the absolute quiet void, resolving out of existence once and for all. It's a hilarious, tragic, and profound reminder of the fleeting absurdity of life, the universe, and everything. But your journey through the cosmos doesn't have to end here. If you want to continue exploring the deep philosophical mysteries and breathtaking narratives hidden within the greatest stories ever told, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and dive into our other videos that unravel the secrets of existence.